Welcome to my channel. Today I will build two fly rod holders for my friend's boat. The reason I build the fly rod holders is that we always use multiple fly rods when we fish for sea trout, but only one person is fishing at a time. If there are rod holders in the boat, the person who is not fishing at the time does not have to hold the fly rod. I build the fly rod holders from a shelf made of oak. I start by cutting the shelf into two pieces that are 34 centimeters long. Since the shelf is already 20 centimeters wide, I don't need to do anything about the width. Then I cut two more pieces to dimensions of 9.4 by 7.5 centimeters. These pieces act as spacers and should be attached to the back of the holders. If these spacers were not there, the fly reel crank would hit the plate that the holders are attached to. The fly rod holders have a belt clip on the back. These are not to be used as the holders are to be mounted directly on the plate that will be attached to the boat's railing. That's why I remove them. There isn't much material to screw the holders into, so I reinforce the places where I'm going to put the screws with some sawdust and glue. Glue and sawdust didn't get as hard as I thought it would, so I redid it with epoxy and sawdust as a binder instead. Sometimes you have to learn from mistakes. Now it's at least as hard as the plastic around it. The head plate has quite sharp edges. Instead of sanding them down by hand, I use the smallest router bit I have to round the corners. Time to attach the plate that the holders will be mounted on. I attach this with glue and two screws from the back of the main plate. Now it's time to drill holes in the rod holders. I start by drilling 4 holes in each rod holder with a 3mm drill bit. Then I countersink the holes so that the screw heads are flush with the plastic. Once the holes are countersunk, I mount the holders with clamps and drill holes in the plates to which the holders will be attached. I glued 2 leftover pieces of the shelf together so that I got a 3.6 centimeter thick piece. Then I cut the piece into 2 pieces measuring 5 by 9 centimeters. Now I drill a 3.5 centimeter hole in each piece that is 2.6 centimeters deep. It is in these holes that the fighting butts of the fly rod will be placed. Both rainwater and seawater will enter the hole I drilled. Therefore, I drill an 8mm drainage hole in the lower edge of the large hole so that the water can drain out there. The holders for the fighting butts also have sharp edges, so I mill these off with the same router that I use for the head plate. Time to attach the holders for the fighting butts. I have measured the distance from the holder that holds the fly rod and the cork handle to the fighting, but on several fly rods and have come up with a distance that will fit all the fly rods that we use. Since the cork handles are soft, it can be difficult to put it completely straight in the holder. That is why I use a dummy instead when attaching the holders to the head plates. In addition to glue, I also attach the holders to the fighting butts with 2 screws from the back of the main plate. I have applied a coat of epoxy and sanded the wooden parts for the rod holders. Now it is time to drill holes in the main plates so that they can be attached to the railing. I will be using 6mm stainless steel countersunk screws. So I start by drilling two 6.5mm holes in each wooden part. Once the holes are drilled, I continue with the countersinking. Now I'm applying the second and final layer of epoxy. The epoxy is now fully cured. Time to attach the holders to the main plates. The holders are completely ready for use. All that remains is to attach them to the boat that we use when fishing for sea trout. We attach the front rod holder with two stainless steel screws and nuts on the back.
Nu jävlar sitter det. Helvete vad snyggt. Har ett spö. Fan, nu hämtar vi ett spö.
Before attaching the rear holder, we test a fly fishing rod in the front holder. The rear holder could not be attached with nuts on the back because the space behind was filled with floating material right behind where we are going to attach the holder. Instead, we use countersink stainless steel screws with large threads. There is about 7mm of fiberglass to screw into, so we estimate that these screws are sufficient for the rear rod holder to be securely attached. And here we have the fly rod holders mounted on the boat with two fly rods. We are happy with the result. Now all that remains is to try to catch some sea trout during the fall fishing season.
Fan vad snyggt.